Welcome to Joint Session Diverse Voices in New York State Cannabis, the podcast where policymakers, legislators, thought leaders, licensees, and advocates come to discuss the evolving landscape of cannabis in New York and beyond. I'm Herb Barbot, former Director of Operations at New York's Office of Cannabis Management. Each episode, we bring you in-depth conversations with key voices shaping policy, business, and advocacy, plus expert insights on the latest developments impacting the industry. This episode is brought to you by the team at Modern Advocacy, a new voice for smart, strategic change. Modern Advocacy is proud to support Joint Session, the best place to hear directly from the people shaping New York's cannabis industry. At Modern Advocacy, we believe the future is built by those who show up. Learn more at modernadvocacy.com. Welcome to episode 17 of season 2 of Joint Session. This is Herb Barbot. In this episode, we'll speak with Nicolas Guarino, the Venezuelan-born founder of Jaunty, one of the top-selling brands in New York State. But before our conversation with Nicolas, we'll take a spin around this week's news. Also, a heads up, we're taking a break for July 4th. Our next episode will be released on July 15th. Enjoy the holiday and please be safe. Seems like New York is not the only state where the governor and lieutenant governor are squabbling. For those of you who don't know, New York's lieutenant governor, Antonio Delgado, has already announced that he's challenging his boss, Governor Kathy Hochul, in next year's Democratic primary. In Texas, Governor Greg Abbott signed a bill expanding medical cannabis, but in a surprise move, vetoed a ban on intoxicating hemp, a ban that had been strongly promoted by his own lieutenant governor, Dan Patrick. Abbott signed HB 46, which expanded the list of qualifying conditions in the state to include, for example, chronic pain, and it expanded the list of allowed products to include, for example, vapes. A major change is that the number of licensed retailers will increase from 3 to 15, and each of those entities will be able to open multiple locations. The surprise came when Abbott vetoed SB 3, a bill to ban intoxicating hemp products. SB 3 had been closely watched not only in Texas, but by industry stakeholders across the U.S., as Texas's hemp industry grew to include thousands of licensees and is currently valued in the billions. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who had championed SB 3 since last year, took to social media to express his frustration and called out Governor Abbott. Governor Abbott remained totally silent on Senate Bill 3, the bill that would have banned dangerous THC products in Texas, he wrote. His late-night veto on an issue supported by 105 of the 108 Republicans in the legislature, strongly backed by law enforcement, many in the medical and educational communities, and the families who have seen their loved ones' lives destroyed by these very dangerous drugs, leaves them feeling abandoned. In California, cannabis regulators have awarded $50 million to fund more than 50 research projects over the past 5 years. Last week, the California Department of Cannabis Control announced that it would award an additional $30 million. The funding for this research comes from the state cannabis tax revenue. At a time when the federal government is pulling back funding for cannabis-related research, California is stepping up, said DCC's director, Nicole Elliott. Just last month, one DCC-backed study looked at heart health risks from cannabis consumption, and another, published by the UCLA Labor Center, looked at tough conditions for workers in the industry. DCC said its priorities for this funding round includes analysis of cannabis crop yields, environmental sustainability, and a comparative analysis of its enforcement strategies. In Utah, a new poll from the Hinckley Institute of Politics and Deseret News found that more than 53% of Utah residents supported legalizing for adult use. Another poll nearly 10 years ago found that just 22% supported adult use legalization. Support for the state's medical cannabis program was strong at 77%. Back in New York State, the Cannabis Control Board held a rare Friday meeting on June 27th. This was the first meeting led by new CCB Chair Jessica Garcia. The CCB is now one member short of a full board due to Ms. Garcia's elevation and the removal of former Chair Tremaine Wright. Among the highlights of the meeting was the appointment of a new Chief Equity Officer, L. Simone Washington, to fill the role that has been empty for over a year after the former Chief Equity Officer was placed on administrative leave back in May 2024, eventually resigning in November. The board also approved final public convenience and advantage regulations, which amends a mechanism for licensees to seek waivers from certain distance requirements between existing and proposed dispensary locations. Best wishes to Chair Garcia and to Ms. Washington in their new positions. As always, thanks to Cannabis Wire for the news. Check out Cannabis Wire at cannabiswire.com. Venezuelan-born Nicolas Guarino comes from a long line of South American farmers, a legacy that inspired him to co-found one of New York's leading cannabis extraction companies. Founded in 2017, Jaunty is New York's #1 selling cannabis vape brand. Jaunty also produces and distributes edibles and concentrates to virtually every dispensary in the state. Welcome, Nicolas.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Herb. It's a pleasure.
All right, so that intro was from the recent Forbes magazine article, April 18th, 2025 edition, where they celebrate the entrepreneurs, the innovators, the disruptors in the field. How did it feel to be among that illustrious group?
I mean, we felt super honored, honestly. Very, very honored, surprised. We've been, as you said in your intro, thank you. We've been working since 2017 now in cannabis in some form or another. But it started all with like non-psychoactive hemp, right? And it was, we're going to provide to you the benefits of the cannabis plant, the medicinal benefits of it, and without the psychoactive side. And I was just realizing yesterday, I was talking to our current investor and one of my mentors, and we were talking and just kind of going down memory lane, all the stuff that's happened to get to this point with Jaunty. And we're like, wait a second. So we've been working together since May of 2021. And I kind of realized now that it sort of spurred on me that we're just getting to the point where we've been working on our Jaunty and on our adult use side for longer than the very tough years we had on the CBD side. And you can kind of start to feel that in the company now. Like we went in the CBD side from selling our main product, which was oil. A unit of that oil we would sell for 1 kilo we would sell for $5,000 to then selling it for like $65, right? 5 or 6,000 to 65. So it was this big 99% drop. And a lot of the core team that was Sweat Equity has been in the company through all of it, through all of those years, including my wife, who's our VP of Finance, our distro manager, our ops, our COO. And we all now are like in a slightly better mood and just like able to think strategically and all excited and blah, blah, blah. And now we look back and we're like, well, sure, we were burnt out like to the ground. I don't even know how we made it to this point, but now that it's been longer that we've been going in an upward trajectory rather than that 99% trajectory we took, it feels a lot better for sure. But yeah.
Well, congratulations. And I can imagine the anxiety of being a startup is no longer, quite what it was.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Okay.
And we had COVID there in the middle of it as well. So there was like a 2-year period where we were all just working with no pay and kind of surviving off of the weekly checks that the government was giving out. So it allowed us to survive at least. So it's part of the story.
All
Yeah.
right. Can you talk a little bit about emigrating from Venezuela when you were 12 years old and, what that was like and your initial impressions of the United States?
Yeah, I mean, I immigrated to the US because of a divorce, which was already like a very tough time in your life when you're 11 or 12 years old. And then I got to the US and I don't want to turn this into a therapy session,
That's fine.
but
It wouldn't be the first
a
time.
lot of like 11 or 12-year-old immigrants who come to the US experience the same thing because now as an adult I've talked to a lot of them, but there's a big culture shock and like I was kind of used to being one of the popular kids back in Venezuela and one of the kids that like had some influence, and I got here to like and I moved to Texas too, so like I took it all in stride, but there was plenty of racism and just like
Mhm.
stuff that didn't exist in Venezuela. It was just a lot of culture shock. So I would say from like 12 to 16, 17 was pretty rough, to be honest with you. I smoked a lot of weed and probably too early to probably help me cope with some of that stuff.
Mhm.
And then everything started to get better also when I got into college in New York City, and things changed a lot after those years of like middle school, high school. But I don't know. I also spoke English already, which was great. My
Right.
mom is American, so I had gone to the US in the summers. I always saw the US as like, and I think all foreign people, many foreign people at least see the US as like, that's the great place. That's where you want to be. So it was like, it was sweet as well. So I would say it was bittersweet. There was like the shock thing, but then there was all the comforts and like, the American candy, which I love so much. And when it came to Venezuela, the Jolly Ranchers, the blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, it was good and has pros and cons. Yeah.
Yeah, and where in Texas?
I moved to Houston, Texas,
Okay.
originally, yeah, and sixth grade. Yeah,
Yeah.
sixth grade.
So, was there a moment or an experience that sparked your interest in going into business and becoming an entrepreneur?
My family's all entrepreneurs, and like
Mm.
my dad, I was super lucky on that with my dad that I was the youngest son, and so he spent a lot of time with me and he took me to all of his meetings. He mainly did like we worked in livestock and agriculture for generations. We had this farm
Hmm.
since like 1870 there, and he traded cattle with either the Middle East or like Brazil or Uruguay,
Mm.
countries down there. So he was really well connected, and from a young age I got to go to all of those meetings. I got to fly around in small private airplanes with politicians and with business people from Venezuela, and like I got to see I think a lot of things that like people that age wouldn't have gotten the chance
Mhm.
to see or the privilege to see. And so it always just felt like inherent that I was gonna do something with my own business, either mine or with my family's, with my dad's farm. And my plan when I moved to the US to when I went to college in the US was to just formalize my management and administration understanding
Hmm.
to come back and help my dad build something bigger, essentially. That was the original plan.
Hmm.
But while I was in college, it was Baruch College, a CUNY school, and Baruch is very much like a school of entrepreneurs where everybody's talking about what's your next business going to be, what are you fundraising for, and New York. I was of course an avid consumer of just psychoactive cannabis, and then New York created the pilot program for hemp. My sister happened to have a piece of land in New York that her husband had, who's a New Yorker. And I kind of felt like, okay, well, there's a piece of land there, and we can just go and try this out as like
Hmm.
in a pilot form, like to see if there's any money to be made. And then of course we learned about feminized seeds, about oil, about CBD, and as we started to learn and we worked in different farms, we went to Oregon and worked there for a few weeks, worked
Okay.
the processor in Colorado for a few weeks. um, that's when we kind of got to the conclusion, okay, the market that actually exists in the US that there seems to be some infrastructure and demand for is not, you know, paper, industrial materials, seed, food oil. It's really like CBD right now, and it's also the place where we can fundraise. So
Mm.
we went out and raised $2 million for 40% of the company of
Yeah.
Nature. And then we also raised like 900,000 in debt, which was actually a house that my sister that land that my sister took a mortgage on. So that was sort of the initial fundraise and how we got into cannabis. And to be honest, the whole time to my family and everybody else, because they fought me a lot on my cannabis consumption, it was always this like, this is the non-psychoactive one, don't worry, like blah 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 blah. But inside I knew the secret plan was like, as soon as possible, we're gonna transition to the real stuff, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, so you didn't just fall into the cannabis space. I mean, this was a calculated, planned execution.
Yeah, for sure. We spent a year planning before we raised the money, and working in different places and learning about, because initially, like I said, we thought we were gonna have this utopia farm where we like produced textiles and paper and also medicine and blah blah blah
Hmm.
blah blah. Quickly learn like what is reality. And not to say that those efforts aren't great. That's just not like the experience level that we were at to try to work in some commodity industrial thing. We needed to find something niche specialty that would have robust margins so that we could actually survive, right?
Yeah.
Commodity is a whole other world,
And then how
which
did you
we ended
settle?
up in, by the way, anyway.
What's that?
Which we ended up in the commodity world anyway
Mhm.
because overproduction of CBD was rampant. So, but
Yeah.
yeah.
So now on the THC side, how did you settle on the name Jaunty? It's got a particular
Um, It was
sense to it.
honestly my partner Christian. He's a partner in the company Sweat Equity, and he's our chief revenue officer and super creative, smart guy. And then him and Dan DeSorbo, who's our VP of creative and who's the designer that made Jaunty. It was funny. Like Christian just came into the office one morning and was like, I got it. You're gonna love this. He always gets all excited about stuff, and he's like, it's Jaunty. And then he's like, Jaunty is a happy feeling and puts a pep in your step. It's a word that is not often used, but it's nice and short and sweet, and it's just one. And I wasn't super sold by it, honestly, like the first couple of days. I was just kind of like, and then they put the logo together, and we have some photos of the iterations that we went through to get to
Mhm.
the final logo that I don't have here with me, unfortunately. But when I saw the first iteration, I was like, oh yeah, that's gonna work. Like when I saw it, instead of just hearing it, when I
Mhm.
visibly saw it, I was like, okay, that's actually gonna work. And we worked on a few different versions of it, and at the time we also had other brands too, so it didn't feel like we were putting all our eggs in one
Mhm.
basket. We had resonators, we had jumbo dose, we contracted with a brand called Critical, so it was four brands in total, and we were like, well, if one of them doesn't work out, and they all worked out okay, but we just quickly learned that having multiple brands is an endeavor that takes way more people and money than
Mhm.
than a cannabis company of our size can put forth. So if we wanted to have a winning brand, we needed to just focus on one, and that's when we consolidated everything in. But getting ahead of myself maybe. But
Yeah. Well, no, and again, as Forbes pointed out, Jaunty has achieved significant success in New York. So, what do you think makes that brand stand out? Over the hundreds of other brands that exist in New York State right now.
I think right now in the early market, it really has to do with execution in the back end, like in the background, meaning that if you are reliable in every sense of the word for everything that our two levels of customers need. We have a buyer who's our B2B customer, and then we have our consumer that's going into the store.
Hmm.
Um, at this point, if you can execute really reliably with customer number one, and then of course you have to have a good product. Like there's
Hmm.
no question about that. When a consumer tries your product, it has to, it's subjective, but some things are objective. So you have to meet all the objective boxes in your product. But let's assume that you've got that, which many people do have, because it's what people are passionate about is making the product.
Hmm.
But then you have to deliver it on time, have an easy way for the store to reorder, have a way for you to remind them that they need to stay in stock,
Hmm.
right? And if you accomplish these reliable things with the buyer, to the consumer, you appear reliable as well. They come in and you're in stock all the time,
Hmm.
and the product tastes the same every time they pick it up. That really has a snowball effect. So I know it's kind of like a boring secret, but it is really just like execution on the delivery to the stores and on the product being the same every time. We now have 40% of New York stores on next day delivery. So if they order by 3 p.m., they'll get the order tomorrow no matter what. Unless, it's 8 p.m. and they don't want to take the order anymore. Sometimes we deliver really late, but and we're gonna get to by the end of the year to have 75 to 80% of the state on next day delivery, which will be like all of Metro New York, all of Capital Region, and most of Western New York, Buffalo, Rochester.
Okay.
That sort of thing, you make the life real easy for the buyer and the people in the back room that are checking your stuff in, and it's all easy to check in and blah, blah, blah. Well, then it's really easy to recommend Jaunty to the consumer.
Hmm.
And then on top of it, you sprinkle in a little bit of work with the consumer, which we can't afford to do more than that because most of our margin is going into buying more inventory to keep up. But if you do spend you go to consumer events, you have some hats that you can occasionally give out, you have some batteries if you're a vape brand, you at least do that little box for the consumer, like, hey, we're here and we care about you. We're just a small company right now. Um, that's what Jaunty's doing. And the name is also nice and it looks pretty, but like mainly the other stuff.
Now, do you make the deliveries yourselves,
Yeah.
or you don't have distributors locally?
No, we don't. We've gone back and forth a lot about giving up our distribution, but we think it's like our most important touch point with the
Hmm.
account. It's how we know what the health of the market is. And then on top of it, one of the silver linings of the disaster in Venezuela and all the problems that are going on there is that my cousin had to move out of there. My cousin is a logistics whiz. He's a guy's in his 50s. He built a poultry business, a distribution business for poultry in Venezuela from like a tiny shop to one of the largest regional distributors. So he's obsessive about logistics, and he had to deal with logistics where like you had to bribe the police to get gasoline, you know what I mean? Like it was very difficult to get things moved in that country. So when he got here, he was like, "So what's the challenge?" I was like, "Well, look, the challenge is you got to do it for less than 5% as a cost, as a percentage of sales." And he's since the beginning done it for less than 5% and done it really, really well. And they're just obsessed with it. So they called me the other day and we're like, we're going to launch a same day delivery. I was like, guys, calm down. The market's not even going to understand same day delivery. Just they're very happy with next day delivery. So since we have that expertise, it's one of the things we're the best at, honestly, is distribution. We keep it ourselves, and it's one of our differentiators.
Now you talked about the COVID time period, but you also talked about being able to raise a couple of $1 million in equity, almost $1 million in a loan. For most people that are in this business, I mean, those are unheard of. But I don't want to make it sound like it's that it was so easy for you. Like what were some of the obstacles that you had to overcome besides
Yeah.
fibbing a little to your parents about your grand plan?
Yeah, so the for the 2 million, I would say timing was super important. It was 2018 when we raised that, and money was still pouring into the cannabis, anything cannabis, whether it be CBD,
Mhm.
to the cannabis industry. So that was critical. We would not be able to repeat that today, just to be clear, it wouldn't happen today. And then our strategy for it, because I was 22 years old. I had, whatever, heard a lot about business and I was a good parrot. I could repeat things pretty good, but there's a lot of things that I still needed to experience to know what I was talking about when investors were asking me about risk and about what could go wrong and etc. What would I know, right? But every time that we had a pitch, every time we had a meeting, and this 2 million, I'm proud to say, like none of it was raised from my family. We really did raise it from outside capital.
Mhm.
We the thing is we were 900K short, so then I did have to go beg my sister, and that was a whole other drama that we finally just paid last year. But in any case, we would meet with an investor, and the first probably 10 or 12 meetings were just absolute flat out no's. And we would ask why, and because we were just, just tell us why. And when they would tell us why, they would always come up with an excuse or kind of a reason why. It's, well, I'm worried about the return on investment over 14 months. I'm worried about the valuation. I'm worried about my priority if everything goes wrong. I'm worried. And we would either write a memo response to that kind of thing, or we would give them an option to negotiate on the valuation, whatever the different issue might have been. We learned something from the meeting, and then it would kind of build up our arsenal. And by the time we were like in pitch number 15 or 20, there was almost nothing they could say that we didn't have an answer for ready, because the other investors that had said no, it had helped us kind of build that out. And we thought we weren't going to be able to raise it, and we were about to give up on everything, let go of the option that we had to buy the farm, all this different stuff we had going on. And one investor called and said, "Hey, we're going to put up $500,000." And when that one investor came, then a line of previous investors who had not put money up started putting up 50,000, 100,000, 50,000, 300. And then we actually got to the 2 million, and we had to be like, no, okay, we can't sell any more than 40% of the company because for our $5 million valuation.
Mhm.
So that was it. It was just building up from the nose.
Yeah. So at this point, what's been the most rewarding aspect of Jaunty and doing this work?
Um, can I say paying down some debts that we've had for
Absolutely.
years?
Whatever the most rewarding aspect is.
No, I mean, paying down debts has been relieving, not rewarding.
Yeah.
I would say the most rewarding aspect, honestly, has been seeing the different departments now really start to take shape, and like now where I used to be involved in everything, now I'll come into a meeting where things are just being presented that are super smart. Like I told you about the next day delivery, that was a whole plan that was done without my involvement. So it's sort of like the company coming to life, if you will, if you pay people well and you've set really smart people in the teams and leadership has equity. It's quite amazing what the company can do. And that I sometimes will be having like a team dinner and I get like teary eyed from how proud I am of that stuff. Yeah.
And your wife is still on board. She's still working.
Yeah. We're actually promoting her next month, which is gonna be great. She's been our VP of finance for years, and she's gonna turn into our CFO next month.
All right. Well,
That's
I'm
that's
I'm
very
glad you're
rewarding.
promoting her and not the other way around.
At least.
That would have
At
been
least.
uncomfortable. Uh, so, how do you see your company contributing to New York State, and not particularly in cannabis, but just more broadly?
More broadly, I mean, I think the biggest thing for us is that we're always looking at how do we have the least amount of people and pay everyone the most amount of money.
Hmm.
So I think I still have a lot to learn, but I hope that we can be one of the companies in New York, regardless of industry, that has built a platform by which people can actually make a career and retire and have a living wage.
Hmm.
We're hoping to by next year, we already have health insurance. We have like all the basic benefits, but we're hoping that by next year we can actually do some significant matching. We just added our 401k this year, and maybe by next year we'll be matching. That's something that's really important for me. I want everybody in the company to make as much money as we possibly can.
And
And
what's the staff size at this point?
68,
68?
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, 68. 68 and hopefully going to stay hopefully we're going to be able to scale and double sales and stay still well below 100.
hmm.
So that revenue per employee should be going up, which should mean everybody should be able to keep getting raises, etc. And then just kind of going back to cannabis a little bit, it is all the advocacy work that we do, right? And we ourselves are constantly working with Joe Rossi on advocacy. We also contribute heavily to the ECMA and work with Kalen over there
Hmm.
on advocacy. I think that will long term because we're that group this group that I'm talking about, we're all thinking very long term. We're able to think long term. We're in a position where like as processors we've financed the retail side and we also finance the cultivation side, and we have to think about things that are going to be sustainable in the long term. So, I think it'll have an important legacy for New York cannabis, hopefully in 5 or 10 years, that it doesn't just get taken over by a few big guys, that it's actually that
Hmm.
micros are able to thrive, that medium businesses are able to thrive, and small businesses as well, and mainly because it's just going to make a better cannabis market for the consumer, and we have 70 million tourists that come to New York every
Hmm.
year. So if we take advantage of this, we have it there for us to take, being the leading cannabis tourism capital of the world. I just think there's a lot of opportunity there. So it's important that the advocacy work that we do.
Yeah, two things I wanted to add to what you just said. First, Joe Rossi was actually our first guest this season.
Oh, that's right.
And we do have enough. By the time this particular episode is released, we will have released an episode on New York State cannabis and tourism. So we're
Perfect.
really on
That's
top
great.
of that. So I think the tourism potential is very exciting for us in New York. So now looking back at your journey from Venezuela to the U.S. and to New York, eventually into New York. Uh, what advice would you give to young immigrants coming into this country? This might not be the best time, right? But still, I think you're a great example.
That's a good question. What advice would I give? I think the most important advice could be to not lose yourself in the new culture, to try to appreciate that the culture that you come from is also valuable and equally important, and so to kind of own that and share it with people
Mhm.
rather than changing yourself, because it'll take a long time to find yourself again after that. But that's too deep for a 12-year-old, so I don't really know. I don't really know what I would be able to tell a 12-year-old. Just, hey, everything's gonna be okay. You'll get through it, you know?
Yeah. No, and I think that itself is obviously a great message. That it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And usually I know even with our kids we say it's going to be different when you're in college. It'll be very different when you're in college, and that
Yeah.
proved to be the case for you. Now, what's your outlook on the New York State market over the next 3 to 5 years? A lot of predictions out there. Some good, some bad.
Oh, I think the New York State market is going to be a big market. I think the question is, are the operators within it going to be deep in debt with the IRS and approaching bankruptcy every quarter, or are they going to be sustainable businesses, like
Hmm.
I said, that can do 401k matching, that can create real jobs for people, sustainable jobs, not just low-paying hourly wages, right? So I think that's what's most. I think there's no doubt that it's going to be a massive market and that the legal market is going to take over from the black market. I think that's going to happen like it's happened in every other market. I just think it's how it happens is the question. And OCM has some really important work that they need to do with the Trade Practice Bureau to protect consumers, to protect the two-tier system, and so it's kind of jury's still out on how that's going to go. I feel like we're going to find out by the end of this year. There's some very key things that need resolution that we'll find out by the end of this year. But what I have no doubt is there's going to be a lot of people buying cannabis here.
Yeah. What about advice to OCM, to the legislature, to the governor, to make sure that the market survives in a way that you just sort of illustrated?
I think the most important advice is just to take seriously the warnings from the other markets.
Right.
And they have on some things. The COD list is a perfect example of something that no other market was capable of and that is very powerful here in New York.
Could you explain what that is?
Yeah, the COD list is a list where distributors or retailers that don't pay their bills get posted, and thereby no distributor can sell to that retailer on credit terms. They can't give them terms, and so that's very damaging to a store, and so it forces the stores to be disciplined with their ordering patterns and with the number of SKUs that they carry. One of the most important things for a successful retailer, in my opinion, is limited SKU count so that you can manage the business and get higher sales of the SKUs that you have in there versus less sales of a lot of SKUs. I would say listening to the outside, to seeing the other issues, because that's one issue, but there's big issues like the track and trace and the way that it's going to be implemented, and what are we going to do with the data that comes from the track and trace, who's looking at it. If we have the option, for example, to use a software that can detect anomalies for us, let's not say like, oh, we'll implement that one day, whatever. The sooner you implement that stuff and make the track and trace effective, the better, because otherwise, as you've seen in all the other states, the track and trace just becomes a double negative. Not only are you having the compliance expense of it, but it's being used as a tool to divert and invert product from the market, because all it is just a repository of data. So if there's no way to act on that data, so there's important lessons like that from other states, and all of that lands essentially in pricing. So to keep sustainable pricing in a market, you've got to attack root issues. And instead, unfortunately, the OCM goes to some, I want to call like Chavista mentality things where they say, let's just set price floors to everything. Well, that's not the root issue. If there's material coming in from out of state, the price floor isn't going to fix that, because there are people that are willing to to traffic material through state lines. You think they're worried about your price floors or so I think taking very seriously the two or three other key problems that other states have: illegal stores, inversion, diversion, and testing, like those things they need to take seriously. And I think they did a good thing by giving more power now to the OCM when they took away the salary from the CCB. So hopefully we can move faster rather than having so many stupid conversations about things that should just be like a given. We need to track and trace. We need to watch what happens in the market before we license 3,000 licenses or whatever it is. There's these different things that other markets have already shown us. So.
All right. Well, Nick, thank you for your time today. Where can people find Jaunty products?
Right now in like 330 dispensaries in New York, so you should be able to find them almost anywhere.
Right. So if it's a legal dispensary, you're in there.
Yes, all right. Exactly.
Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for the time. Really appreciate it, Herb. It's a pleasure.
Real pleasure. This episode is brought to you by the team at Modern Advocacy, a new voice for smart, strategic change. Modern Advocacy is proud to support Joint Session, the best place to hear directly from the people shaping New York's cannabis industry. At Modern Advocacy, we believe the future is built by those who show up. Learn more at modernadvocacy.com. That's it for this episode of Joint Session, Diverse Voices in New York State Cannabis. If you found today's discussion valuable, consider leaving a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. It helps more listeners find the show. Better yet, share it with colleagues, advocates, and anyone interested in the future of cannabis in New York. Joint Session is produced by me, Herb Barbot, together with executive producer Robert Curtis from Simlev Media. Special thanks as always to Cannabis Wire. You can follow us on Instagram at jointsession.pod and on LinkedIn at Joint Session Podcast. If you have any comments, questions, or topic suggestions, reach out to me at herb.jointsession@gmail.com. Until next time, this is Herb Barbot. Thanks for listening.